Now in today's video, we're going to take a look at my team selection ahead of blank game week 29. We're also going to take a look at how my team will be progressing and my chip strategy over the next few weeks. And of course, we are going to be discussing who I think personally is the best captain for this game week. Now before we dive into today's video, of course, if you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as we are trying to hit 12.5k subscribers by the end of the season, and it isn't possible without your guys' amazing support. As always, get your comments in as well. I will try and help as many of you out as I possibly can. Let's start off then first with our game week 28 points. We got 52 in the end. It was a small arrow down from around 10k all the way down to 13k, so not too bad. I knew game week 28 and game week 29 were of course going to be problem game weeks. Of course, we needed to bank as many transfers as possible. Meant that we couldn't really be too aggressive in game week 28, and I think that kind of shows with the side as well. And a lot of players just didn't really turn up, to be honest. As you can see, a lot of players on twos, a lot of ones and twos and zeros across the board. We did get the Aina Hoyson decision wrong. If we'd have put Aina in, probably would have been a lot closer to actually just maintaining our rank at that position. However, I knew these two game weeks were going to be extremely difficult. I know for a fact game week 29 is probably not going to go our way as well, considering that we are going to be looking at a potential -4. And you might be thinking to yourself, Tom, why are you looking at a -4? Well, let me show you how the team is lining up without any transfers, anything like that. Let's just align that properly. As you can see right here, yes, we've got a few gaps, haven't we? We do have a few gaps. Of course, we could just make 3 transfers, get ourselves a decent team. However, the -4 that I've got lined up, I think gives me the best captaincy option for this week. It also gives me a player I'm really, really grateful to have in the side as well, and I think could do exceptionally well with a great fixture this week, as we'll come on to see. But it also, I think, sets me up nicely for game week 30, where then I don't have to make any transfers. We get ourselves into a position, have a decent week, take that extra transfer into the wildcard in 31 and really set our team up. But as you can see, there is a lot of work to be done with this side at the moment. So let's start off then first with the betting data heading into this game week. Which teams should we be looking to target? I feel this is useful for both people on a free hit and of course not on a free hit this game week. Everton's clean sheet numbers are looking pretty decent, to be honest, so I'm very happy that we do have Pickford, the people that have got Mikalenko as well. Potentially one of those fixtures. I think Pickford could be a very, very safe, steady pair of hands if you're on a free hit as well this week. Nottingham Forest, okay projected goal numbers. I was probably expecting a little bit higher, maybe towards the 1.82 mark. However, the clean sheet numbers are still pretty decent. City have got the highest across this weekend with their Brighton fixture at 2.2. So that is one of the reasons I want to really go and get Erling Haaland in this week. He's going to be backed by the bookmakers as well to, of course, have a decent week in terms of anytime goal projections. City are top for projected goals as well, which is looking really, really decent. I was expecting the Wolves data as well to be a little bit higher, considering the opposition and considering how poor Southampton have been this season, but the bookies don't seem too keen on Wolves, which is a little bit of a surprise. Bournemouth, they're really fancying against Brentford, and that doesn't shock me, to be honest. Brentford are statistically one of the worst sides for XG conceded in the league this season. The bookies are really fancying an Arsenal win as well, and a Fulham win. This is something we saw if you watched the AI draft, the free hit draft yesterday. We saw with the 11ify data, they're really fancying Fulham. They're also, you know, the bookies are backing that up as well. And the Fantasy Football Hub predicted points model as well also has Raul Jimenez as one of those top players. So maybe he's one of those players that's potentially going under the radar. Of course, if you've got Robinson as well, definitely worth some consideration keeping him in the side, because out of this list, they've got the 3rd best projected goals, which is very, very surprising. And it could be one of those fixtures that does go a little bit under the radar. They've got better than Manchester United against Leicester, better than Wolves against Southampton, and better than Nottingham Forest against Ipswich. I didn't think I'd be saying that, but maybe Fulham are one of the teams to monitor this game week. I've not seen too many people discussing bringing Fulham players in, or of course on their free hit drafts, so maybe just one to focus on this week and maybe try and find that differential that could of course have a big impact on your side. Let's continue then. Let's take a look at my transfer targets for this upcoming game week. Obviously, they haven't really changed too much from the transfer targets video that we did earlier in the week. Of course, we're going to need 2 defenders, and we could go down one of 2 routes. I think Gavardiol is definitely going to be a nailed player in there, one of the top scoring defenders over the next 2 weeks for projected goals, and I'd like to get in early on him because I do feel like he could be a player that could rise in demand over the next few weeks, especially with wildcards and potential double game weeks coming up for Manchester City. He's, of course, scored the most goals out of all defenders this season, which is absolutely good. And you know, City are looking better defensively as well. If we were to go with him, we've got a choice. We could go Aït-Nouri, Gabriel, or of course the cheap Wolves option. Now, Totti is also a decent option in that Wolves bracket as well, and someone that we actually can afford. And his minutes are looking a little bit more secure than Agabadeo. Oh, I hope I've pronounced that correctly. You know, I'm not very great at pronouncing names, but hopefully I pronounced that one correctly. So yeah, we've got a choice really. And if we did go for the cheaper option, it does allow us to get a more premium midfielder in. And that is something that I think I'm going to go down the route of, to be honest. It means that I can go and get myself a more premium midfielder, whether that be Jarrod Bowen or Bruno Fernandes, who we were looking at. The other option for me and my side would potentially to be go for Gavardiol, Aït-Nouri, or Gavardiol, Gabriel. Now, the reason I would potentially look at Gabriel is the 11-5 numbers had them as one of the best sides for, of course, predicted clean sheets for this week. If you look at the betting markets as well, also Arsenal are fancied to do exceptionally well over the next few weeks as well in terms of those clean sheet numbers. The only thing that I would say is we've also noticed a decrease in terms of attacking him numbers for Gabriel over the past few weeks, and that is kind of slightly putting me off him, to be honest. I don't think the game week 30 fixture is ideal. However, both at home, they could very easily keep a clean sheets, but I think maybe having that little bit of a gamble, maybe trying to target one of those flair players in midfield could be the better route to go. And I think that is the route that I'm going to take with my team. So we're going to go for Gavardiol and a cheap Wolves defender. Of course, I spoke about that midfield player and who that flair player could be. I think I'm going to go for Bruno Fernandes. I like Jarrod Bowen, but I just think that Leicester away fixture is too appetising not to miss out on. Anything that Manchester United do realistically does come through Bruno Fernandes. He's the top player for goal involvements this season. He's on penalties, he's on free kicks, he's on corners. Yes, the data doesn't look exceptional, but like I said, anything that Manchester United do, this lad has a massive influence on it. The other reason I would like to go for him is, again, I feel that way I've probably covered off the 3 potential players I'd want to captain come deadline day. We'd have Haaland, we'd have Bruno Fernandes, and we'd have Chris Wood. So I'd be able to put myself in a position where I could obviously pick and choose who I really wanted to have in terms of my captain heading into that week. And I feel it just covers me off a little bit more. If I wanted to play the safe and effective ownership route, I'm probably going to go either Haaland or Chris Wood in that regard. However, I do fancy a punt and wake up on the day and think, you know what, Bruno Fernandes is going to be the man. If he impresses tomorrow night against Sociedad, that could be the one that potentially does sway me into picking him as my potential captain. But I think he's going to be the better option, going for Gavardiol and a cheap defender, rather than, of course, going for that more premium defensive setup and having to settle for somebody like an Anthony Elanga. For me, in my personal opinion, seems like the better route and the better play. Obviously, we've kind of alluded to that. I'm already going to bring this man in. It is going to be Erling Haaland. I think for the next 2 weeks, he is a really, really good captaincy shout. Obviously, in game week 30, we will have Mohamed Salah back with Everton at home, which is also a really, really decent fixture for, of course, Mohamed Salah, and we know how consistent he's been. But again, it's having that option to pick the best captain every single week, and I feel that the position that we'll be able to get into with going for Haaland is we will have that option. Of course, as well, Manchester City probably will have some double game weeks on the horizon. Again, will be a player that if it doesn't quite work out, we can of course get rid of in our game week 30 wildcard. The problem that I've always had with Haaland this season, and the reason I started the season without him, is exactly the same reason now. He's not going to justify that 14.7 million price tag unless you are captaining him every single week. And for the next 2, we are going to be doing, and we kind of have that get out of jail free card with, of course, the wild card in 31 as our escape route if it doesn't quite work out for Erling Haaland. But as we saw, Manchester City top of the betting markets for projected goals, so I really, really fancy him and, of course, Manchester City to do exceptionally well over that period. And hopefully this decision to bring him in while he's still at low effective ownership before the double game weeks, before people wildcard, could be the correct move and, of course, the correct play. Speaking of captaincy, let's take a look at the predicted points for this game week. As you can see, the Fantasy Football Hub model is absolutely loving Erling Haaland all the way out at 7.1. Palmer is an interesting player. He's going to be the ones that will have to unfortunately make way within my side. I just think he's not quite there in terms of his confidence. He's kind of snatching at a few opportunities, not making the right pass, not making the right decision. And I think a lot of the pressure is building on him at the moment. And I don't think he knows really how to handle it because he's never been in this position in his professional career before. Hopefully he can recover and become a great player. But for right now, I do feel he's probably going to be one of those players that we are looking to, of course, offload. Like I said, Bruno Fernandes is there and Chris Wood in terms of our other captaincy options if I did want to go down that route. Like I said, bringing Bruno in, bringing Haaland in, and of course having Chris Wood already in my side, I think for me kind of covers me off in terms of the captaincy. Whether or not there's a big surge, maybe we see in some of the deadline stream captaincy polls that Chris Wood is going to be kind of, 80-90%. We can cover ourselves off in that regard and obviously just play it safe. Or of course, we could go for the gamble in Bruno Fernandes, or if Haaland is looking like he could be one of those players that does obviously explode or has really super high effective ownership, again we can cover that off, make sure that we are safe. And I know it does sound a little bit like we're trying to just play things safe, but with us taking that -4 this week, I definitely think it is something that I am going to have to do. I'm going to have to play it a little bit more sensible, a little bit more safe, kind of just keep the team in order, get the players in that I need to get in for the next 2 weeks and survive up until the wildcard 31, hopefully remaining within kind of that top 20k bracket to really push on, attack the final few weeks with the of course the chips that we've got left, and hope that a couple of differentials on a wild card or in a double game week really fall our way and we get ourselves into a prime position. That was kind of all the build up and of course the data for this game week. Now let's head on into that team selection. Wasting no time, let's dive into the team selection itself then. Starting off first with our defenders. We're of course going to go for Jordan Pickford. I don't think Fabianski's going to play. Areola seems to be Graham Potter's #1. Pickford, best clean sheet odds according to the bookmakers this week, so hopefully he can come through. Hopefully a couple saves as well. Like I said, if I was on a wild card this week, he would probably be my #1 pick in terms of a goalkeeper. Heading into the back line, as you can see, our 2 new transfers in. Agabeo, I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And of course, Gavardio. We've got him in there just for this game week. He's just going to be a cheap 4 million defender. Of course, we could potentially look to go for Totti, whose minutes do seem more secure. We do have the money in the bank to potentially go for that move. So that is something that we could potentially consider heading into it. I want to see the predicted lineups. If he's in it, then I'm just going to stick with it. Of course, if he's not, then we're going to make that switch to Totti. We do have the budget, of course, available. The other thing that was kind of interesting to me was maybe taking a punt on Timothy Castagna. We saw what the Fulham kind of data was looking like. I don't need that defender to play next week, and they've obviously got Arsenal, so it could just be one of those. It keeps me maybe a Fulham player in there, gives me a little bit of a differential. Who knows how it comes down to that one. Obviously, Gavardio's in there. Manchester City's betting data look really good, like I've spoke about. He's one of the players that I've wanted to have in, purely for the fixture next week as well with Leicester at home, and of course I do feel like he's going to be a very popular asset on the game week 30 wildcard, so I do feel it's probably better to get in early on him rather than later. Aina, I'm so glad he's back in my side, to be honest. I've benched him for back-to-back clean sheets in recent weeks. He's one of those players that just continues to pick up points randomly with bonus points, assists, goals, and of course Forest being one of the best sides for XG conceded. I was a little bit surprised at how low the betting data actually had them for a clean sheet this week. Probably would have expected a little bit higher. However, I'm still very happy to have him in there, and I do feel like the Forest defence is going to have super high effective ownership heading into this blank game week. Huijsen's in there. He's a player that we've had for a long time. Like I said, he just has a fixture. There's no real point taking a player out that has a fixture that's okay, and they could get something out of that game, of course. Obviously on the bench, we've got Munoz, but no fixture for him this week. A decent one next week when, of course, we do flick to our game week 30 team. Let's head on then into the midfield, starting off first with Brian Mbeumo. This is probably going to be one of his last weeks within the side, maybe next week as well. After that, that's probably Brian done for the season, to be honest. He's not a player that I'm probably going to be looking at on my wild card, so it could be a farewell to Mbeumo, sorry. And it is a little bit of a shame, but his recent numbers have definitely dropped off a cliff. Of course, he is still a 90-minute man and penalty taker, so I'm never going to take one of those out of the side for, of course, a player that might have a slightly better fixture in my opinion. Then we've got Kluivert. He's really fancied by the bookmakers, and I think he was really intelligent within the Spurs game as well. If you watched his assist for Evan Nielsen, my God, he looked really, really good sat in that 10 role. Of course, on penalties as well, the bookmakers really fancied Bournemouth to go and do really, really well this week with 2.5 projected goals. And I definitely think Kluivert will have a hand in that. And I think he actually looks a better asset with Evan Nielsen back within the side. Obviously, we've kind of gone through Bruno Fernandes already, but he's going to be in there. Like I said, he was very, very high up on those predicted points list. Third for that, in fact. And like I said, could be a decent punt option. And of course, could be a really, really decent punt captain option, of course, if we did want to go down that route. Our other midfielders on the bench are going to be Morgan Rogers and Mohamed Salah. No fixture for either of these guys. Ideally, I would have liked to have got rid of Morgan Rogers. His fixtures aren't great coming up, but it is what it is, unfortunately. He's just going to have to sit on the bench next week. Salah, of course, will be back in, as we see in a second. Heading into our strike force, and I feel bar Visser, it's probably going to be a very, very template strike force we're going for here. Of course, Erling Haaland with the Brighton fixture, 7.1 predicted points. Manchester City top on the betting data as well for projected goals. All that stuff for me is just adding up. We should get him. Leicester next week as well. Could be a really, really good captain for that one. Visser, his per 90 data is actually still amazing. Like, I think it's 0.68 expected goal involvement, which is absolutely phenomenal. However, yeah, just in recent weeks, it's not quite been there, has it, to be honest? And I think Bournemouth away is going to be a really, really difficult fixture for both Brian and Visser, but I don't have the luxury of taking these players out, so we're just going to stick with them. If I was to swap Visser for anybody, it probably maybe would be Beto or, of course, Raul Jimenez, considering how fancy the bookmakers do fancy Fulham to go and get a couple goals against Spurs. And then finally, it is Chris Wood. That captaincy, of course, could switch to Chris Wood if we maybe get news that his effective ownership is going to be like somewhere like 90 to 100. That could maybe make me just switch my mind. Go for the safe option. Of course, protect ourselves with effective ownership, especially when we're taking a -4, and hope that Bruno and Haaland, can do the bits for us without captaincy, of course. Let's head on then into how the team is going to look in the following week, game week 30. Like I said, the plan is to wildcard in game week 31. So this, of course, is how the team would be looking. Like I said, we don't need that defender spot for next week. And then we probably don't need him in there. And that is probably how we'll line up. We'll either captain Haaland or we'll captain Mohamed Salah. Of course, we'd have a choice between Visser, Rodgers or Aina, in my personal opinion. But like I said, I think that team is looking ridiculously strong, especially that back three there. Southampton, Leicester and Ipswich. Of course, Ipswich for Kluivert, Salah. It's just looking a really good team, and I don't think we're, going to have to make any transfers. So the -4, definitely going to be worth it to set ourselves up and put ourselves in a really, really good position heading into, of course, game week 30. Then it allows us to take an extra additional transfer post wildcard in game week 31 as well. That was my team selection for blank game week 29. Of course, if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you like and subscribing. You know the drill by now. And thank you very much for watching, and good luck in game week 29.